on March 5th, 2024. And we are going to be moving on to 11 informational reports and discussions, 11.1 monitoring report policy, DE 1.0 general district ends. And Brian, are you going to introduce?
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
am. Thank you. Providing information about policy DE 1.0 tonight is our Chief Institutional Effectiveness Officer, Dr. Dwayne Schmitz. Dwayne, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Kingsley. Thank you, President Draper and Vice President Zamora and directors of the Board of Education. So this is the DE 1.0 monitoring report, part 1. So as you know, there's 4 district ends. We're going to really focus on the first, the foundations for success. Really is where achievement and growth and graduation rates and dropout rates and all kinds of important metrics exist. So we'll do this tonight. And on April 9th, we'll talk about connections, success in a changing world, and above and beyond. All right? So the goal of tonight is to provide a high-level overview of some outcomes. Now, in the past, this is a big report, by the way. The report itself is about 136 pages, and there's an executive summary that's just 6 pages, I believe. And so you can, read that to get the quick look at what's really going on. And then I want to point out to yourselves and to the viewing public, there's a whole set of data visualization tools that the IT department and the Assessment Research Evaluation department put out. And so that data set, all those data sets and those visualization tools back up this whole report. So truthfully, there's just a ton of information, right? So tonight, I'm not going through trying to make every point that I could about the monitoring report and the things that it elevates. I'm not going to try and go through every single section with a slide or two. I'm just going to highlight a few things that I think are important for us to just talk about, and then leave it to yourselves to read through that report. And the district and its leadership team certainly reads through that report, and we use it as a foundation for our strategic plan, for our unified improvement plan. It's part of how we identified our priority performance challenges. We have community partners who use that report throughout the year to go after grants or to understand PSD better and know how to plug in and help us out. We have departments around here that go for grants and use pieces of it. So the monitoring report, DE 1.0, really does get used year-round by many different stakeholders in PSD. Tonight's just a kind of a high-level overview and introduction for yourselves and the public. Okay. So we're going to start off with, normally in achievement, I show a whole bunch of graphs that basically point out that Poudre School District has a high level of achievement relative to the state and relative to our comparison districts and so on and so forth. Tonight I'm taking a little different twist on that, and I want to just get focused in on the literacy implementation that you all know we did on K-5 this year, and kind of use that to highlight some achievement outcomes. So when we do an implementation like that, K-5, we have 2 data sets we can look at where we have fall and winter data, beginning of year, middle of year. So we can look at gains across that time frame, right? So this is, let me back up just a little bit. DE 1.0 is really about the 2022-23 school year and the outcomes that we've attained in alignment with the district ends. But a couple of years back, the board had expressed interest in, when applicable, and we have more current data than that, maybe it's enrollment data patterns, maybe it's achievement like I'm about to dive into here, that you'd like to see it. So that's why we're actually looking at 23-24 data when I talk about fall to winter gains on an important event like literacy implementation K-5. So we have MAPS, NWEA MAPS test, as well as DIBELS 8, and both of those assessment programs show gains for our K-5 students. The typical fall to winter gains on those assessment programs range between 3 to 5%. That's over the past years. This particular fall to winter in 2023, we saw gains for K-5 approximately 13%, meaning we had 13% additional or more students who were measured as being at grade level proficiencies by those assessment programs. So we expect to see an implementation dip potentially. Folks talked about that. There's actually not evidence of an implementation dip, which is great. There's actually evidence of some acceleration. Now, I don't want to overbeat that drum because this is early. It's, we've got 3 or 4 months under our belt in these test gains that we're looking at, but it's certainly a good sign going in the right direction, so I want to just kind of elevate that for us a little bit. Okay. Achievement. Staying with achievement for a minute, I also want to make a point about how much attendance matters when it comes to achievement. This is another thing that's highlighted in the report. So once again, before I click to the next slide, I will point out that when we do look at our achievement relative to the state, relative to our comparison districts, which are Boulder, St. Vrain, and Cherry Creek, they're the most similar to us, large districts, great outcomes just like us, we actually outperform our comparison districts, we outperform the state, we outperform the country, frankly, when we look at nationally standardized tests like NWEA. All of that is still true. As I say that, it is also true that we have achievement gaps, as many districts do. So we have various subgroups of students, right, that have lower achievement than the overall population. So mentioning that too. But to dive into achievement, I'm going to focus a little bit on attendance and the impact that it has on achievement. Okay? So this slide is kind of just taking a moment to remind us that the gaps that I just mentioned a minute ago that persist. Specifically, we see gaps for students supported with IEPs. We see gaps when we look at achievement for our multilingual learners or English language learners. We also see gaps for students that come from households that may be a lower socioeconomic status and some specific ethnicities, okay? So we acknowledge that. We're working on that continuously, as many districts do. But I want to now zero in a little bit on the impact that attendance makes on our achievement across all different subgroups of students, including the overall student group. A series of slides we're about to look at, and I promise this is the only slide I believe that has sort of like a statistical lesson embedded in it. Just to ground home viewers and board members, just to remind us, when we look at achievement in PSD, we tend to look at something called the achievement effect size. The reason that we look at achievement effect size is because all the different vendors, the CMAS test, the SAT, the DIBELS 8, the NWA MAP, they all have different ways of creating cut scores for grade level proficiency and different metrics they report out. But what we can do is we can take all those different metrics that they give us, we can standardize those metrics into Z-scores, puts them on kind of a probabilistic or normative scale relative to like other real students who took the test, either nationwide or statewide. And we can actually see how our students performed on that test across different tests using the same exact metric, so that it allows us to do lots of things, combine data in sensible ways and understand things quickly. So what you're looking at up there is a picture, and the blue normal curve represents the overall national or state outcome on an assessment. Could be MAPS, could be CMAS, could be SAT, wouldn't matter. There's generally a normal curve outcome for the nation or the state or the large group of students taking it. The red curve represents PSD's normal curve on that of outcomes on that same assessment, and it's shifted to the right, generally about 0.25 to 0.3 of a standard deviation unit. I used to call that, and I think I still will, the PSD advantage, okay? Not sure exactly what creates it. Could be the great community that we serve, could be that we're in a college town, could be our great teachers and our curriculum alignment, but there's a very consistent result where the PSD achievement outcome distribution is shifted in the positive direction, meaning a better outcome, or to the right of national or state distributions. The distance that normal curve is shifted is what we mean when we say an achievement effect size. It's being measured in a standard deviation unit. Okay, so 0.25 of an achievement effect size means 0.25 of a standard deviation unit of the underlying assessment. To be able to make sense of that for lots of people, because lots of us don't think in terms of standard deviation units unless you're maybe a statistician. A lot of us are more familiar with percentile rank, right? So I have a little chart up there that just points out that if an effect size is 0, an achievement effect size that we're talking about is 0, that's the same as the 50th percentile, meaning right at the middle typical outcome nationally or statewide. When we see we have a PSD target of an effect size of 0.25 or greater, that is equivalent to saying that our typical student's outcome is actually at the 60th percentile nationally. So the 50th percentile for PSD is the 60th percentile nationally, meaning our average student is doing as well or better than the lower 60% of students instead of the lower 50. It's shifted 10% units to the right. When we get all the way up to a 0.52 achievement effect size, which we're going to see in just a minute, we do hit that half a standard deviation shift to the right. We are saying our typical student in that group is actually at the 70th percentile. That's a huge shift to the right. Okay, so that graph was just there to kind of ground us in what are we talking about when we say achievement effect size. What is the overall CMAS, PSAT, SAT? That ranges grades 3 through 11, standardized testing, grades 3 through 11. There's multiple years of data in the slide. And it indicates that that green dotted line that's cutting across that graph is marking off the 0.25 effect size, right? A quarter of a standard deviation shift to the right. And we can see clearly that we're always above that at 0.31, 0.32, and so on in the most recent 2 years. So the table below it, there's tabled values below it that are color-coded. All the blue cells are at they're at that 0.25 or higher. We met that growth target in those grade levels for those years where you see those blue cells. The green cell indicates that that's a growth effect size greater than 0, meaning the PSD students did achieve better than their national or state academic peers, meaning the distribution shifted to the right. The point of that slide is just that not only do we have consistently high achievement in math, but you can see that that achievement is really being contributed to by all the grade levels. Remember, all these graphs and things are in the actual report, so I'm just going to kind of move along a little bit. Now we're looking at reading outcomes. It's the same exact picture we saw a moment ago, but this is for reading or evidence-based reading and writing when it comes to pre-SAT, SAT, as opposed to math. Very similar story. You notice that basically third of a standard deviation shift to the right of our distributions consistently, and you can see that those grade levels are all contributing to that wonderful outcome. Furthermore, you can see that in the most recent year of 22-23, there's a whole lot of blue. Things are going well, okay? Now, hold that picture in your mind for a second. I'm going to hit the slide and show you what that looks like for the students in that same group. This is still a reading achievement. It's CMAS through SAT. The only difference is it's trimmed to the data set such that students had attendance less than 95%. And you notice that that achievement effect size line graph drops dramatically. It's below our target of the 0.25 growth effect size. Remember, the other group was up at like a third of a standard deviation, a 0.3, 0.33. This drops down to just under the 0.25. Interestingly, these students are still outperforming their national or in this case, actually, this is all state assessments, so they're statewide academic peers. So what happens, though, when we do the same thing, but we look at only students who have 95% or higher attendance? And you see that those achievement effect size go up above 0.5. So that whole distribution is shifted half a standard deviation to the right. That's like saying for that group of students, their typical outcome is at the 70th percentile nationally, which is very high. Achievement matters, right? When students show up consistently to school, their measurable outcomes, really all of them, move in the right direction. Okay, I'm switching gears now from achievement. So there's lots of different slides and information in the full report on achievement, but we're going to switch gears now to keep on this theme of attendance. We'd identified attendance as an issue that we're working on through our strategic plan and our UIP and our various efforts that we have going on in our system. Attendance rates have declined in PSD over the past several years. That statement is true for statewide and for other districts in the state. So attendance in general has gone down in the last several years. Our target is that and this is really generally a statewide target, that we have 95% or better daily attendance. It's worth mentioning, though, that PSD attendance rates do lag our comparison districts' attendance rates, okay? And the lower attendance rates are evident among all the student groups, all the different grade levels, the subgroups, the population overall. So attendance is an issue, which is why it's in our strategic plan and it's in our UIP. We know it impacts other outcomes we care about. And we know that from these simple data points I just mentioned, that it's an issue worthy of PSD's time and attention, which we are giving it.
Sorry, Dwayne, can I interrupt for just one moment, going back to the attendance? I'm just wondering the definition of attendance here. Is this excused, unexcused, combination of both?
Combination of both.
Okay, thank you.
Now, and all of this data is for 21-22 and 22-23. So on this next slide, what I want to show you is what is the attendance polled very recently for 23-24, okay? So again, this table breaks out what you just asked about. The first column is overall attendance percent. The second column is the excused absences percent, and the last column is the unexcused absences percent. So if you were to add those last two columns and take it away from 100%, you would get that attendance total in the first one. So it breaks it down a little bit. And then the columns, the green columns that we see to the right, are just showing the breakdown of attendance by grade level, K through 12 in our district, for this school year up to that date of 2/27/24, where the green is the attendance rate, the black color indicates the excused absences, and the orangish red color shows you the unexcused. So what happens as kids get older? They have more unexcused absences. That's what's happening.
Yeah. For attendance, is this missing a full day or partial day or a couple of classes?
That's a good question, because every district gets to define this a little bit differently. And I think our definition varies just a little bit by elementary versus secondary. I know that there's some folks on our attendance action team and such. So maybe we take that at the end and talk about attendance. Sound good? Okay, team back there, you're forewarned. They're ready. So we'll get into that in a little more detail. All right, so I think the theme to this particular slide, though, is that you can see the big difference is not in the distance of the black on each of those bars. It's actually just that as the grades go up, the unexcused absences go up. That's what's driving that. Okay, now switching gears out of attendance into what we call additional support, progress. So real quickly, what do we mean when we say additional support in this district? We have a system where we look at all of the scores from last year for each student on standardized tests in reading and math. And if we have a student for whom all of those scores are traveling below the 35th percentile, we would identify them as a good candidate for additional support in that subject. And so the data slides we're about to look at are trimmed to reflect those students who are traveling in that lower 1/3 of the achievement distribution nationally that are in school here with us in PSD, okay? So what we see, and we've seen this in past monitoring reports as well, is that the growth that we see, the academic growth, annual growth for students that were identified as good candidates for additional support exceeds their academic peers statewide and nationwide, but did not hit our growth target, which is different than our achievement target, our growth target of 0.20 growth effect size. And so, and that growth from this most recent year of 22-23 was a little bit lower than the prior year of 21-22. I want to explain real quickly, like, what is a growth effect size? Because we talked about an achievement effect size, right? Where our distribution in PSD shifted to the right a certain number of standard deviation units. Once we know the achievement Z-score, or you could say effect size for a group, but for an individual student, their Z-score on the pretest, and we similarly know their Z-score, their location on the post-test. When we subtract those two, we get the Z-gain, or the growth effect size. So a 0.20 represents students on average coming in wherever they came in, but not just growing as much as their academic peers statewide or nationwide, actually shifting 0.2 standard deviation units further to the right than their typical academic peer. So that's why a 0.2 growth effect size is our target. It means that our kids are moving forward or accelerating relative to their state and national peers in a given time frame. Make sense? So our growth target is 0.20 and above. So there is some consistency. When we look at which schools, school by school, met this target, and there are schools, we'll see in just a minute, that meet this target each year in reading and in math, there is some consistency year to year and across subjects on which schools those are. And we generally highlight those in the monitoring report because we want to shine a light where we see positive things happening because we want to spread those best practices. There's one last thing I want to mention, that in Poudre School District, there is an increasing number of students that are being identified as good candidates for additional support. So we do see this population, if you will, growing a little bit in PSD over time. This is a list of schools based on 3 different measures, Acadians, MAP versus the third one, CMAS, PSAT, SAT. These are the schools that actually did hit the 0.20 or higher growth effect size target for the students they served that had been identified as good candidates for additional support. So they're helping kids catch up, which is great. Acadians really covers students from 1st through 3rd grade, because this is growth, so it's not including kindergarten. For MAP, it's 3rd through 8th grade. And for CMAS, that would be 9th through 11th grade, okay? That's being represented there. And you can see on that list, and maybe it's harder to count there from there, but we have 18 schools in that Acadians list that met that growth target for their students that had been identified as good candidates for additional support. Based on MAP, a different grade range, and assessment, there were 13 schools, and for CMAS, that list contains 14 schools. And so each year we kind of identify those for the reasons I had said before, so it kind of helps us with conversations and we spread best practices. Okay, we're going to switch off of achievement and growth and additional support, and we're going to move into graduating with options, one of the priorities in Poudre School District, right? So I created this graph because there's a big important story in here. We have been, Poudre School District has been on an upward trend in our graduation rates across multiple years, but it's also, you can clearly, what's indicated there is that the graduation rate has bounced substantially up and down, given that we have 2,000 graduates a year, basically. That's a lot of bounce in a number with that much end count in it, so it kind of indicates a lack of systemness, in my opinion. And then in the last 2 years, within the rounding error of 0.1, we have been at 87% twice. That's, to me, that is a celebration in that we've done some system changes with the help of our counselors and our teachers and our principals. It's all hands on board. We've been doing that work for several years, and you're starting to see those results. And one of the results you're seeing is consistency. And you're also seeing that it didn't just slide back down, so that's great. We have more distance to climb up, but it is a celebration that 2 years in a row we're at 87%, that it was stable for 2 years, and that we met that target of 85% or higher, which for many, many years, I think I've been doing this report for 15 years, and I believe there was only one other year in the past where we even hit that target, where we beat that target, and we still weren't as high as these latest 2 years. So that's just a positive story. Now, it's nice to pat yourselves on the back and celebrate. It's also important to challenge ourselves to know where our areas are for growth, right? And we have areas for growth here as well. So students supported with an IEP, their graduation rate compared to like peers, other students around the state also supported with IEPs. Our graduation rate was 66.7% in the class of 23. The state's was 69.3%. So that means we were below the state in our graduation rate for students supported with an IEP. I can make a similar statement for students eligible for free and reduced meal prices. Our rate was 71%, the state's was 73.3. So there's two kinds of gaps you're seeing there, right? You're seeing that for those two groups, they're not getting the same 87% as the overall population. That's what I call an internal gap. And then there's a difference between that group locally versus a similar group statewide, and I call that like an external gap. They're both important to recognize, so we have work to do there. We know that, and we're engaged in that work. English language learners did gain 5.4 percentage points compared to the prior class graduation rate, so they're at 69.8%. So there's a celebration there that it did go up. It is slightly higher than the graduation rate statewide at 69.4, but you can see how close those two numbers are. PSD should be much higher than that, in our opinion. So I mention all three of those groups because we're actively working in all three of those spaces to increase those graduation rates. And when I say that, it's kind of like saying increasing achievement levels. It's not the achievement score we're trying to raise. It's the actual learning of kids that's we're trying to raise, right? That's reflected in the scores. The scores are supposed to be an indicator of. Similarly, we're not working to raise just the graduation rate. We're trying to raise the successful completion of high school for our students, and graduation rate, the 4-year on time, is an important indicator of that. So we're working toward the students having the outcome that all of them and all of us want for them. Okay, so when students don't graduate, why? You know, we could unpack that for hours, which we won't do in here tonight, but trust me, our teams here, we do unpack that for hours. We have lots of conversations about this topic, and we dig into it. This graph is hard to read from your chair, but what this is I took the students who didn't graduate with the class of 2023, for whom that was their anticipated year of graduation, meaning that was the graduating year for them 4 years after they had started 9th grade. Of that group, 87 of those students are currently enrolled in PSD schools in the fall. And I asked a simple question: what credits are they still behind on as they came into their 5th year of high school? And so that little colorful pie in the middle, every one of those colors is a different subject area. And we have graduation requirements based on all those different many things. So those are the credits a lot of the students were missing. The other thing that slide shows us is that I got curious, because I've heard this before, well, what if a lot of the students who don't graduate kind of came to PSD as 11th graders or 12th graders, and they were so far behind, we just couldn't get them caught up in time. So I went back and I looked at, of those 87 students, how many of them showed up in our schools as 9th graders 4 years earlier? And the answer is 73 of them did. Now, that means that 84%, and my slide's wrong because it says 88%, and I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that, okay? But if you recheck that number, 73 divided by 87, I think you'll get 84%. But that means, this is the important point, not that Dwayne messed up his math tonight, but that 84% of the students who didn't graduate within 4 years and then stuck with us the following year, 84% of them were with us as 9th graders. So it's not that we're just bringing in students from elsewhere, okay? Our dropout rates have always been low in PSD, frankly. If you look at the data, it's very consistently we're under 1%, or we're right at 1%, maybe we might be 1.1%. It's low. It's low relative to the state. It's low relative to our comparison districts. So our dropout rate from last year, and it's important to remember, dropout rate is not 1 minus the graduation rate. Because the dropout rate is 8th grade through 12th grade. All those students get into that calculation. Graduation rate's just calculated difference. It's not one minus the other. But our dropout rate was 0.9%, and that's a decrease from the prior year of 0.2%. So both of those are celebrations in a way, right? And our dropout rates are well below the state and the comparison districts. So that's just been a consistent theme in PSD's data that we see. All right. Financial assistance for post-secondary. Poudre School District recognized several years ago through this monitoring report work that we did not have the FAFSA completion rates that we see statewide, we see in our comparison districts, and that we think are important. College is expensive. If students don't fill out the FAFSA, they're not really accessing those possible funds. Very important. So, did I just click it forward? No, we're good. So we did see, did I click it forward one on that one? No, we're good. Sorry, I don't know. I must be tired. I bet I'm not the only one. All right, so Tanya Alcarez is sitting in the back there. And Tanya, I don't know for certain that you're the one that wrote that grant, but I bet you're the one that wrote that grant. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But we did get that $30,000 grant to address this issue. It's a completion grant for FAFSA and CAFSA, which is, I believe, the Spanish version of the FAFSA, Spanish language. And so with that money, at our Future Ready Center, Tanya and her team and other folks in PSD have been running workshops and information nights for parents and community members. They've been providing training for counselors, finance teachers, and family liaisons. They've provided one-on-one completion support for, again, families and students that need that kind of, one-on-one help. And bilingual assistance has been prioritized in that. So that's just work that I thought you'd be interested in knowing is going on. And you can see in the line graph on the top, the black line is PSD, the other lines are the pink as the state, and the other three are our comparison districts. So it's evident that our FAFSA, now notice that data is kind of dated. That's for the class of 2021, right? We're going to be graduating the class of 2024, but state data in that space is always lagging. Doesn't mean that there's not a signal in that data that we need to pay attention to. So we're working hard on that. When it comes to preparing students for a rewarding future, we are a leader. PSD absolutely, by every measure, is a leader, and we should be proud of that, very proud of that. Class of 2021, the most recent CDE statewide data so that I can get statewide comparison district as well as us. You see some data points up there. Our dual enrollment is really high at 70% compared to the state at 42%. Concurrent enrollment, 65% compared to 29% for the state. Career and technical education enrollment, CTE enrollment, 80%. Way to go, compared to 72% statewide. Keep in mind that's a little bit data at 2021. Some fresh data, 22-23, we had 3,332 students, 912, that took college classes, and that's generally not ninth grade. We had 1,106 earned credits for work-based learning experience. I want to pause there. Just think about that for a minute. 1,106 students in a school year getting credit for work-based learning experiences. We only are able to do that because of the great partnership that we have with the Chamber of Commerce. And they help us find those placements that are appropriate. We also have work-based learning coordinators at each one of our high schools that make that magic happen, and that makes us a bit unusual among districts statewide. It's one of the reasons we're leaders in this space. And we had 628 career tech ed industry certifications earned by PSD students. Huge celebrations. The great work going on. Great work going on in PSD. All right. So when it comes to first-year college outcomes, and we're just about done with this presentation, we have seen this year after year. So if you look through the monitoring report, you'll see graphs to this effect. We have the lowest really remediation rates in both English and math. We have high first-year GPA. We have a high college graduation rate within 4 years. We also have a high percentage of our students that persist from their first year of college into their second year of college, which turns out to be an important marker. On every one of these, PSD is consistently a leader statewide, even relative to our comparison districts. A quick summary. These are the last two slides. Normally, I have shown you the table, which is in the report. There's a full report that has the table of outcomes, so with all the colors. But basically, if we summarize them, right, they're in 5 different groupings. The first one's on early literacy, and we met 5 out of 8 indicators within that grouping of our targets. So early literacy, there's a lot of positive outcomes. The second one, achievement and growth, we met our targets on 4 out of 6 indicators. Again, Poudre School District kind of has a history of high achievement, high growth, and yes, we can start digging in by subgroup and find some things that we need to work on. The additional support target, we have 5 indicators. We met 1 of them. That indicated, and yet what I said was true. We're getting high levels of growth for our kids, but we set some pretty rigorous targets for ourselves in that space, because it turns out that students that need or are good candidates for additional support, they need high levels of growth 3 years in a row to truthfully be catching up. So we set rigorous targets for ourselves because you've got to meet rigorous targets in order to actually get the students to where you want them to be. And remember, we have some schools that are hitting that mark, but not all of our schools, and we're working on that. On the fourth grouping around graduation completion, we meet 4 out of 4 indicators where we meet those targets. Again, there are gaps and such we pointed out earlier. And then on the fifth grouping of targets, mental health and belonging, I want to mention, Healthy Kids Colorado survey data came out the day that we submitted this report to you all. So when we talk, I think it was April 9th, it's in April, we can have the Healthy Kids Colorado survey section updated. The version that you got, it's the same static stuff that we had from the last round. So we'll update that. So right now, we met 1 of 2 indicators. Depending on how that Healthy Kids Colorado piece comes in, we might meet 2 out of 3 indicators, because I've taken a glance at that report, and thankfully, a lot of numbers moved in the right direction, like there were improvements for PSD. So we'll see. We'll get more detail in the future. All right, is that a new record? 35 minutes?
I gave you 10 minutes, but I'll take 35.
Oh,
That was great.
All right.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
All right.
Do you need a towel? That was like a marathon.
That's quicker than usual.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? I know this is, part 1, so we've got part 2 coming, and that's actually not next meeting, but the meeting after that, just so everybody knows. And we'll be talking, as you said, about the Healthy Kids Club and mental health and that sort of thing. But any questions for tonight? Yes, Scott, go ahead.
Great presentation. Thank you, Dwayne. I always like to see your graphs. They're easy to understand for the most part. Standard deviation,
Yeah.
a little tough, but yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow, everything looked great. I'm really excited, especially about the literacy increases. The one area looked to me, and this is near the end, was the FAFSA completion. With that, with what Tanya's doing in the workshops and things like that, when will we know the next round of stats to see how we compare?
Tanya, do you want to talk about FAFSA a little bit? Or that is why I asked Tanya to be here, because she's leading a lot of that.
Yeah, great question. The data is live right now. And so you can see it by high school. You can't see it by district. We have to aggregate it by district. And I don't know if you follow what's going on with FAFSA right now. So I don't know how accurate our data is, but they just relaunched the simplified FAFSA. They've had problems with the platform. So across the nation, the number of FAFSA completions are down. And then the CAFSA is for Colorado students that are undocumented. So that data is not as live, but we'll get that at the end of the year, June 30.
So I'll add one piece to that. So it is in the monitoring report what the latest numbers were, but what Tanya just said is super important in case someone didn't know. They've had problems with FAFSA. And so we're about 5% below at this time. Right now, we're about 5% below where we normally are at this time of the year. But that is highly likely due to the problems they're having with the FAFSA getting it processed. So it's very suspect data. We really can't tell.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in one of the things, as I look at the grant that you got, that's so timely because I know so many parents right now are struggling with it because of the changes and things are not going through and you're not able to submit and all of the issues. So I think that grant was extremely timely, so thank you. Other questions? All right, I think we're all good. Dwayne, thank you so much. And I just want to, you said it in the beginning, but I want to reiterate for everybody that this is on our BOE Insight. It's on the web for the public to go ahead and take a look at. You can slice and dice and figure out, different populations and schools, and you can do all of that. So you can go ahead and see how we are doing on your own, not just take our word for it here.
Can I give a quick shout out?
Absolutely.
So we have, excuse me, we have Dr. Ran Shi sitting right there next to Tanya. And you all are just getting to know Ran. And she has been a wonderful addition to our team. And she helped write this report. And she's worked on a lot of other things for us as well. But I just wanted to just take a minute to introduce you real quickly to them to let you know we've got a team working on this stuff. So we're looking forward to the next presentation. Thanks a lot for tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much.